In the spring of 1940, a British Royal Air Force pilot named P. Groves was flying over the Giza Plateau when he looked down at the Great Pyramid and saw something that should not have been there. A line. A sharp seam of shadow running straight down the middle of one of the pyramid's faces, splitting it cleanly in two. He had flown over it before, everyone had. But the light that morning was hitting it at an angle no one standing on the ground ever sees, and in that angle the most famous structure on Earth was showing him a secret it had kept for 45 centuries. He raised his camera and took the photograph, and the photograph proved something that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. The Great Pyramid does not have 4 sides, it has 8. For more than 4,000 years, everyone who looked at the Great Pyramid saw a 4-sided monument, a square base rising to a point, the simplest and most stable shape in architecture. That is what it looks like from the ground. That is what it looks like in every photograph taken from the desert floor, in every painting, in every drawing, in every textbook on Earth. 4 sides. But each of those 4 faces is not flat. Each one is very slightly hollowed inward along its center line, from the base all the way to the peak, folded down the middle like the spine of a book, so gently that from the ground your eye can never catch it. That fold turns each of the 4 faces into 2, 4 becomes 8, and the structure stops being a square pyramid and becomes something no other pyramid in Egypt is, a concave 8-sided figure. Here is the part that should stop you cold. This is the only pyramid in Egypt built this way. Out of all the pyramids the Egyptians raised across 3,000 years of building, and there are more than 100 of them, the Great Pyramid is the single one with this concave 8-sided design. Not a style, not a fashion that came and went, a one-time deliberate deviation executed on the largest and most precise building the ancient world ever produced and then never repeated. And it was hidden so well, folded so subtly into stone, that no human being knew it was there until we learned to fly. In the next several minutes, you are going to see exactly what that hidden 8-sided shape is, why it is invisible from every position a human could stand in for thousands of years, and why it appears, as if on command, only twice a year, on 2 specific days, in a way that points straight at what the builders were actually doing. You will see why the one man who noticed it in the 1800s wrote it down and walked away. And you will see why this single feature quietly dismantles the idea that the people who built this thing were working with rope, copper, and guesswork. If the hidden engineering of the ancient world is something you want more of, subscribe. Every week we look at what has been sitting in plain sight the whole time. Because here is what makes it stranger. Groves was not actually the first to notice. He was just the first to prove it with a camera. Go back to the 1880s. Flinders Petrie, the father of scientific Egyptology, the man who measured the Great Pyramid more carefully than anyone before him, who spent years on that plateau with surveying instruments recording every angle the structure would give up, Petrie noticed it. In his measurements of the core masonry, he saw that the courses of stone in the center of each face dipped inward. He recorded the deviation precisely, as much as half a degree, sometimes a full degree, of hollowing along the center line of each face. He wrote it down in his 1883 survey. And then he moved on. He noted the most unusual geometric feature of the most studied building on Earth as a small surveying curiosity, a dip in the courses, and he never asked the obvious question. Why would the most precisely built structure in the ancient world have a deliberate fold down the middle of every face, a fold so faint it would take an aircraft to reveal it? The honest answer is that the question was too big. Because the moment you accept that the concavity is deliberate, and we are going to see that it has to be, you are forced to accept everything that comes with it. So the observations sat in Petrie's notes for half a century, true and unexamined, until a pilot with a camera forced it into the light. Now look at what the feature actually is, because the precision is the whole story. The hollowing is not a slump. It is not the building sagging under its own weight, not erosion, not stones that slipped over time. We know this because of how exact it is. The indentation runs down the precise centerline of each face, base to apex on all four sides, to a consistent and measurable degree. A building settling under 4,500 years of gravity does not settle in a clean, symmetrical line down the exact middle of every face. It cracks, it bulges, it fails unevenly. This is the opposite of failure. This is a controlled, uniform, fourfold symmetric curve built into a structure made of 2.5 million stone blocks, each weighing on average more than 2 tons. To produce that hollow, every single course of stone across an entire face had to be laid to a subtly different length than the course below it, following a curve on all four faces at once, all the way up nearly 500 feet. You do not do that by accident. You do not do that without intending to do it, planning it before the first block is laid, and holding that plan with absolute discipline across decades of construction. But the geometry isn't even the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part is when it appears. Before we get to that, hold on the construction problem for a moment longer, because it is worse than it first sounds. Think about what laying this curve actually demanded of the workforce. A flat pyramid face is, in a sense, forgiving. You lay each course of blocks in a straight line, set back slightly from the one beneath it, and the slope takes care of itself. A mason can check his work against a taut string and a plumb line and know he is right. But a concave face has no straight line to check against. The center line of each course has to sit fractionally further back than the ends of that same course, so that the whole face bows gently inward, and that amount of setback has to change course by course as the face rises and narrows toward the peak. Every single layer is a slightly different, slightly shallower curve than the one below it. There are over 200 courses of stone in the Great Pyramid. That is 200 separate curves, each calculated, each laid across the full width of a face that at the base runs more than 700 feet, and each one has to agree with its neighbors on all four sides, or the symmetry collapses. And remember the scale of the error margin they were working inside. The base of the pyramid is level across its entire footprint to within about an inch, across more than 13 acres. The sides are aligned to true north to within a fraction of a single degree. These are not people who were laying stones by rough eye and hoping. They were holding tolerances that would challenge a modern construction crew with laser levels, and they were holding those tolerances while also bending each face inward along a deliberate curve that no one standing on the ground would ever be able to see, admire, or even detect. They built a feature for an audience that did not exist yet. They put their precision into something invisible. That tells you the precision was not for show, it was for function, and the function reveals itself on 2 days a year. The concavity is invisible almost all of the time. From the ground, in ordinary daylight, the faces look flat, because the fold is too shallow for the human eye to resolve across that distance. The shadows that reveal it only line up correctly from above, and only when the sun sits at a particular angle. And the days when that angle is exact, when the hollow on the eastern faces fills with shadow and the structure briefly reveals its true 8-sided shape, are the 2 equinoxes. The spring equinox around the 20th of March, the autumn equinox around the 22nd of September, the 2 days each year when day and night stand in perfect balance. The 2 days when the sun rises due east and sets due west. On those mornings, and essentially only on those mornings, the Great Pyramid shows you what it really is. Sit with that, because it is not a coincidence you can wave away. A structure that is already aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy that modern surveyors find difficult to match, its sides oriented to true north, south, east, and west to within a tiny fraction of a single degree, also contains a hidden geometric feature that activates visually on the exact 2 days of the year that define the sun's relationship to those directions. The building is not just pointing at the cardinal points, it is keeping a calendar. The eighth side is a shadow that only completes itself when the Earth reaches a specific point in its orbit, and the builders folded that event into the stone itself so that the pyramid would mark the equinox by changing its own apparent shape. That is not decoration. That is a machine for catching a single moment in the year, built out of 2.5 million blocks, accurate enough that it still works today, 45 centuries after the last builder walked away. And then comes the detail that the standard story would rather you did not dwell on. We are told these builders worked with copper tools, with rope, with wooden sledges and leveling by water and eye, a crude toolkit, brute labor, and trial and error. Accept that for a moment, and then try to make it produce this. To build a deliberate, symmetrical concavity down the center line of a 6 million ton structure, you need to know the curve before you start. You need to lay every course to a calculated length. You need to hold that calculation across all 4 faces simultaneously as the building rises, with no room to correct a drift you cannot even see from the ground. And you need to do it so precisely that the feature, once complete, will align with the sun's position on the equinox, which means you needed to understand the equinox, predict it, and engineer a 500-foot stone monument to respond to it. None of that is rope and copper work. That is applied astronomy and applied mathematics, executed in stone at a scale no civilization has matched since. The toolkit we are told they had cannot produce the building we are told they built. The eighth side is where that contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. This is also why you have probably never heard of it, and that absence is worth examining. This is not a fringe claim. The concavity is real, it is photographed, it is measured, and it has been confirmed by serious researchers across decades. In 1975, the Egyptologist I.E.S. Edwards, one of the most respected pyramid authorities of the 20th century, concluded that the packing blocks of the pyramid had been deliberately laid with inward slopes, producing exactly this concave form. In 2023, a researcher named Akio Kato, working in mathematics and physics, published a study in the journal Archaeological Discovery confirming the concave 8-sided character of the pyramid and describing it as a marvel of engineering visible only from above. And going back further still, the feature was actually illustrated in the Description de l'Égypte, the great French survey of Egypt in the late 1700s, drawn, recorded, and then effectively forgotten for over a century. So this has been documented repeatedly by credible people for more than 200 years, and yet it appears in almost none of the popular accounts of the Great Pyramid. The guidebooks don't mention it, the standard documentaries skip it. Walk the plateau today and no sign will tell you that the monument in front of you has a shape you cannot see. The information has been available the entire time. It simply doesn't fit the story we tell about who these builders were and what they could do, and so, again and again, it has been recorded and then quietly set aside, the way Petrie set it aside, the way the French survey set it aside, true and inconvenient and left alone. Now let me be clear about what I am and am not saying. I am not saying the concavity proves the pyramid was built by a lost civilization or that it required technology we do not understand. There are real physical theories for how the hollowing was achieved with the tools of the period and for why the builders may have wanted it. Some argue it added structural strength, binding the faces inward, and others that it was purely about marking the solar year. The point is not that the method is supernatural. The point is what the existence of the feature tells you about the minds behind it. You do not fold an eighth side into the largest building on Earth, invisible from the ground, aligned to the equinox, unless you are working at a level of astronomical and mathematical sophistication that the simple story of rope and copper does not allow for. The how can stay an open engineering question. The what, a deliberate, hidden, sun-tracking geometry built to a precision we can still measure today, is not in doubt. The pyramid is still standing on the plateau exactly as it has stood for 4,500 years. And every spring, on the morning of the equinox, when the sun rises due east over the desert and the light rakes across those enormous faces at exactly the right angle, the shadow pours into the hollow, and for a short while the most famous building in the world quietly becomes the shape it has always secretly been. 8 sides, not 4. It has been doing this every year since before the first word of recorded history was written, marking the turning of the sun for an audience that for 4,000 years was not even there to watch. No one on the ground ever saw it. It was never built for them. It was built to be seen from above, and it took us until the age of flight to finally look down and realize the pyramid had been showing us something the entire time, and we had simply never been standing in the right place to see it.